Hello Daily Drafters and welcome to the Magic the Gathering Foundation's pre-release guide here on the channel designed to get you ready for your pre-release events this weekend. This video will be full of useful information for beginners to seasoned veterans, whether this will be your first ever pre-release or if you're looking for Foundation's specific information such as a rundown on new and returning mechanics, limited archetypes, and more to make sure you are on top of your game at your LGS. So whether you're new here or you've been here a while, stay tuned for the ultimate guide in helping you crush your Foundation's pre-release. Now, some of you might be asking yourself, what exactly is a pre-release? Well, each year there are roughly 4 to 6 main set releases of Magic the Gathering products, and most local game stores run what's called a pre-release for each of these main set releases. Essentially, you battle it out against your friends and strangers using several booster packs of the brand new cards for the upcoming set that has yet to be released, hence the name pre-release. If this sounds interesting to you, let's take a step-by-step look at exactly how these events are run. Step 1. Locate your local game store. In order to participate in a pre-release event, you will need to find one. If you do not already have a local game store that you frequent, I've included a link in the description to a website that will help you find a game store running an event near you. Now that you've found where you'll be participating, it's time to get registered. Usually stores will run events all weekend, maybe one on Friday, 2 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday. Check with your LGS to see when the events are happening and which ones you would like to attend. Be sure to note that sometimes these events do fill up fast, so you may need to pre-register to ensure you have a spot. It just depends on your store. Other times, you can just walk in and register on the spot. Be sure to find out what's best for your situation. Now that you're registered, it's time for the fun part. When it's time to start the event, you will get handed a pre-release kit like the one on your screen now. For this set, there is only one pre-release kit that you could receive. In other sets, sometimes you have a choice, but for Foundations, we've got just the one. Now that you've got your kit, when the event begins, you will be instructed to open your kit and begin your deck build. It varies from store to store, but usually you will have about 50 minutes or so to build your deck and get ready for your matches. Let's take a look at what you will find when you open your kit. Inside, you will find one traditional foil rare or mythic rare from Foundations with a year stamp, and here's an example of what that card might look like using a rare from the last set, Duskmourn, 6 Foundations play boosters, 1 20-sided spin down die, and 1 MTG Arena code card. As many of you may be aware, draft boosters are now a thing of the past and were replaced with play boosters earlier this year. This certainly threw a wrench in things when it comes to drafting the last few sets, so I wanted to break down what Foundations will look like. And they've kept it relatively simple for us in the last couple of sets here, as this set only has a small sheet of special guest cards that appear incredibly rarely, so it shouldn't be too difficult to explain. Every Foundations play booster will contain a variation of the following: 7 commons, and 1.5% of the time one of these 7 commons will be replaced by a special guest card, of which there are these 10 for this set visible on your screen now, 3 uncommons, 1 rare or mythic rare, 1 non-foil wild card of any rarity from the main set. Usually this slot has about a 19% chance to be a rare or mythic rare, 1 foil card of any rarity, and again, this slot usually has about a 19% chance to be a rare or mythic rare, and the final slot will be a land card that will be a common dual land 50% of the time and a regular basic land the other 50% of the time. Alright, we now have everything we need to begin our deck build. If you'd like to see an example of a Foundations sealed deck build, stick around until the final segment of this video, which is time-stamped below, where I will build an entire sealed deck on screen for you to follow along with. After you've built your deck, you will then be assigned an opponent by the event coordinator, and you will play out your first match. Different stores will give you different amounts of matches for the event, but usually it's a minimum of 3. Sometimes you might get lucky and be able to play 4 or more, it just depends. After you've finished your matches, you may qualify for some prizes, so be sure to check with the event coordinator to cash in on your winnings. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is go over some of the notable mechanics for the set, go over the themes associated with the draftable archetypes, and just give you a general rundown of what's going on in Foundations before I do my deck build, so that we both have a better idea of what to look out for. We don't actually have any new mechanics associated with this set at all. This isn't very common, but since this is more of a, quote, return to the basics kind of set, it makes sense that they aren't throwing a bunch of new mechanics our way. There are several returning mechanics, and I'll highlight just a couple of them here as they are specifically associated with particular draft archetypes, and I'll begin with Raid. Raid is an ability that triggers at the beginning of your end step if you attacked with a creature this turn. That's pretty much it. It's certainly an aggressively slanted mechanic that rewards you for being aggressive by giving you additional bonuses for attacking with your creatures. The other particularly notable returning mechanic is Morbid. Morbid is an ability word that becomes active as long as a creature has died this turn. This creature could have been your own, or your opponent's, or both for that matter, but it only cares if at least one creature has died. You can kill your opponent's creatures using removal spells, have creatures trade in combat, or even sacrifice your own creatures, but if you want the bonus from a card with Morbid, any will do. That does it for the most notable mechanics, so let's check out the draftable archetypes that Foundations will feature, each of which are visible on your screen now. Now, Wizards has said that their goal with this set is to distill each of the archetypes down to their most recognizable forms, so what you see on your screen now are some of the most classic versions of each of these two-color draftable archetypes. Blue-White is looking to assemble a board of flying creatures to take down your opponent from the sky. The evasion makes your creatures more difficult to interact with, and hopefully allows you to close out the game without much of a contest. Blue-Black exists as a control deck centered around the use of your graveyard. Control the battlefield using removal spells and card draw, while you fill your graveyard to extract value for later. Red-Black is the deck that cares the most about the raid keyword mentioned earlier, meaning it will most assuredly be an aggressively slanted deck. Attacking with your creatures will give you all sorts of value from your raid abilities on your end step. Red-Green has always been referred to as a, quote, stompy deck over the years because typically its main strategy revolves around resolving large creatures that simply outsize your opponents. A little bit of mana ramp helps you cast creatures with large power and toughnesses so that you can power your way through your opponent's defenses. Green-White is a +1/+1 counter deck at its core, and that's true once again here in Foundations. The +1/+1 counter synergies are designed to grow your creatures to sizes that your opponents just can't keep up with, and a deck full of synergy is usually a good game plan in sets that don't typically revolve around synergy as much. Blue-Red is as classic an archetype as they come, placing an emphasis on instants and sorceries. Returning mechanics like Prowess usually play a big role in this archetype, and finding a balance between the number of spells in your deck versus the number of creatures is always a fun puzzle to solve. Black-Green typically has one of the least well-defined strategies in these types of sets, but this time around it gets to interact with the aforementioned Morbid mechanic more than any other of the color pairs. Sacrificing your own creatures and killing your opponent's creatures will power up effects on your cards to a level that will hopefully outmatch your opponent. I mentioned that Blue-Red is as classic an archetype as they come, and well, I lied. That title belongs to Red-White aggro. I think Red-White is billed as an aggressive deck in about 90% of sets nowadays, but at least it's something we're used to. Attack your opponent quickly with cheap creatures and combat tricks to forge a path to victory. Black-White gets one of my personal favorite archetypes this time around, and that is Life Gain. By utilizing Life Gain synergies, you are hopefully able to put your life total out of reach of your opponent's forces for long enough to establish an attack of your own to close out the match. And finally, Blue-Green draws on elements of the Red-Green archetype from earlier and is billed as a ramp deck. Defend yourself early and accelerate your mana, then go over the top with huge creatures and impressive spells to bury your opponent in a mound of value. Now, the hardest part about the whole event is building your deck, but good news, I will now go through an entire Foundations sealed deck build to give you an idea of what you want to be looking for in your pool of cards and how to maximize your chance of having a competitive deck for the event. But before we do, if you enjoyed this content or any other content on the channel and would like to give back, I do have a Patreon with a link both in the description and on your screen now. For those of you that don't know, Patreon is a great way to give back to creators that provide you with content that you enjoy, and mine is no different, except for the fact that my Patreon is among the most affordable Patreons in the entire Magic community. I have just 2 tiers available for either $1 per month or $3 per month. Like, that's it. Less than a daily cup of coffee for a whole month's worth of support. There's also absolutely no expectation of commitment, as it is a come and go as you please system. You can support for 1 month and then discontinue and then rejoin later. It's completely up to you. Support on Patreon helps keep the lights on here at Daily Draft, so if you enjoy the content I make and would like to pay it forward, feel free to check it out and throw a couple of bucks my way. Thanks so much for your consideration. Alright, here we are in our deck build, and as I always clarify, I will do again here today. The place that I use to kind of do all of this and this interface that you see on your screen right now, the place that I actually generate this pool so that I can practice building this deck is, as you can see to my left right now, draftsim.com. You can head over to DraftSim, not a sponsor, and generate a sealed pool of any format you want, honestly, and Foundations is up there as well. And you can build on there, but I don't particularly like their deck building interface. I prefer the interface here, where you see right now, which is, as you can also see on the screen right now, sealeddeck.tech. So you can export from DraftSim, import into sealeddeck.tech here, and then build to your heart's pleasure. So that is what I'm using to do this sealed deck build today. You can also practice draft over on DraftSim. It's a great resource. I do really like it myself as well. So we've got our pool. We're sitting down at our local pre-release. And what do? Well, first thing you do is you sort by rarity, and you see, do I have any bombs I pretty much absolutely have to include in my deck? And we got a Planeswalker. And in Limited, that's a great thing to have. A Johnny Caller of the Pride here is a Planeswalker. What else do we have? Raise the Past. It's a reanimate for creatures, mana value 2 or less. Don't know if that's super great. We have a Vindicator. Thousand Year Storm is effectively unplayable in Limited, unfortunately. Elenda's interesting. 4 mana 4/4, lifelink, hexproof from instance. Can get bigger if you've gained a little bit of life. Ashroot, Animist, 4 mana 4/4, trample. And when it attacks, it makes something else bigger. Slagstorm is a red kind of board wipe. Kellen is a red aggressive creature. And a Phyrexian Arena here, which is a way to kind of get some card advantage into the later game. So I think our best rares that I see here are probably a Johnny. Not actually like a ton of super great ones. Kellen is pretty good. I mean, it's a 1 mana 2/1. You can pay 2 to make it a thing that impulse draws when it deals damage to them, and then also pay 3 to make it a 3/2 double strike. So just a lot of good value there. Ashroot Animist is pretty good as well. Vindicator is fine. I mean, a 2 mana 1/1 double strike vigilance trample works well if we're able to distribute counters around and things. And Elenda just needs a ton of synergy to really go off. And I don't know if we'll have that in this pool. So that's what I notice first. So I would love to include a Johnny if at all possible. Planeswalkers are just like really good in Limited, regardless of how good it actually looks on the screen right now. So then you kind of go through the uncommons and things. We only have 1 gold card. It is a Heroic Reinforcements here, which kind of goes along with the Vindicator plan. You know, some of the uncommons here going through. We do have 2 Abrades. Abrade has most recently been printed at common, but because we are in what we like to call a core set or a foundations set here, does look to be uncommon here in this set. 2 Abrades is great. Heartfire Immolator is fine. Fiery Annihilation, 3 mana, deal 5, pretty good as well. Snakeskin Veil is always great and Limited. Once again, usually common, but upshifted to uncommon here. We have a Bite spell, a big creature spell, and a Indrik. In the commons, I see 2 Banishing Lights. Banishing Light is common, whereas that one in the past had been uncommon. I love Healer's Hawk. Healer's Hawk is a great aggressive creature. Works well in black-red, works well in red-white. It's just a great creature. In blue, I see a Tolarian Terror, which could be interesting, although that requires a very heavy mass of instants and sorceries. Much better in draft than sealed, more than likely. In black, what do we have here? 4 mana, 3/4 menace. Gets +2/+0. Whatever. Pilfer, reveal a hand, discard a card, fake your own death, eaten alive. You're going to notice as we're going through all these cards, tons of these cards are reprints, and tons of these cards are not particularly powerful. They're just very vanilla, basic, 3 mana, 2/1 flyer, 4 mana, 3/4 prowess. It's just, there's a lot of basic things happening in the set. That's because this set is meant to be kind of like a set that's meant to onboard new players to Magic and things like that. Make things a little bit easier for them, but it's a draft format and we're going to play it. So that's what we're here to do. We got Atlanta War Elves, and that's kind of what catches my eye to start. So something maybe of like a red-white build catches my eye with kind of like this base here. Like these cards seem to be pretty good. There's a Burst Lightning, which is like a strictly better shock, basically. 1 mana, deal 2 to any target, or 5 mana, deal 4 to any target. Just some other general cards here as well. So this is what I see first. If we're being honest, like nothing really else has like caught my eye. And I mean, we do have the double Healer's Hawk to go with Elenda. If we think Elenda's better than Vindicator and Reinforcements, maybe Elenda plus Phyrexian Arena could be pretty interesting. I don't know if we have the support for that. There's a little bit of life gain. That might be like the only life gain kind of payoff that we have, though, is Elenda. And is that really worth it? It's pretty close. It's a pretty good card. We do have 2 Rugged Highlands to splash here, so this is kind of how I assess my pool and then go from building there. I will say that as you build, usually, not always, but usually the first deck that you kind of stumble upon and where your gut goes is going to be the best option for you. There's a chance you can kind of go through and build, 2 or 3 options and be like, oh, I actually like the third option better. But trust your gut in these situations. Most of the time you're like, oh, this card's great. Oh, and I have some support for this. Just kind of go with that. So with that being said, so this video isn't an hour plus long, I'm going to go ahead and assess all of my options. And I'm going to make a cut to what I would publish as my final deck build if this were my deck and pool at a pre-release. So see you in a bit. Okay, after mulling all of my options, I landed on red-white. A little bit boring, but sometimes in sealed, if you can assemble a pretty good aggro deck, there might be some opponents who are like stretching their mana a little bit to play some bombs that they opened, and it might not exactly work for them. I've had success playing aggro in sealed pre-releases as well. So we've got 15 creatures, which is a little less than I prefer to have in an aggro deck, but the non-creatures we're playing are quite good. We've got Burst Lightning, 2 Abrades, 2 Banishing Lights, and a Fiery Annihilation for removal. Got the Planeswalker in Ajani. Goblin Negotiation is removal that also kind of counts as creatures. And Heroic Reinforcement. Reinforcements also count as creatures as well. It makes 2 1/1s as well. Sunblessed Healer here, 2 mana 3/1 that can kind of bring something back. Kellen, Savannah Lions, good old 1 mana 2/1 aggro card. Goblin Borders with Raid. So just a nice little aggressive deck here. One thing I considered doing was using these 2 Rugged Highlands and or 2 Campus Guides to maybe splash like an Ashroot Animist or something. But the more aggressive a deck is, the more you don't really want to like stretch its mana to kind of splash too much. I think this card is like decent. It's probably not necessarily worth splashing. I don't think this set is full of like insanely powerful cards that you're really going to need to be splashing all that often. So this is where I ended up, and hopefully this kind of gave you a little bit of insight on exactly what to do and how to think about building a sealed deck. And for those of you that have done this tons of times before, hopefully you got to see maybe at least what a sealed pool in this format looks like, with some of the cards and the quality of the rares and the quality of the commons and uncommons all being maybe slightly less powerful than you may be used to with previous sets here. But like I said, regardless, this is a new Magic set, and there's not many things better in this world than new Magic sets. So we're going to have fun with it. Hope you do as well, and hope you get out to your pre-release this weekend. Thanks for tuning in for the deck build. I hope this video was helpful to you and helps you build up the courage needed to participate in a pre-release event at your LGS this weekend. If you've never been to one before, I do highly recommend it. It's one of the absolute most fun ways to play Magic, and you'll meet tons of different players there. If you do end up going, return back to this video and leave a comment to let me know how it went for you. I'd love to hear your feedback about how it went and from your event. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of this video, and I will see you here soon at Daily Draft.